Before we get into the podcast, let's get through the rigmarole first. Remember, guys, this podcast posts each and every single Sunday. We run you through all the Dolphins news you need to know about. This first news story comes from the Sun-Sentinel. Miami's first loss to Buffalo last season convinced Adam Gase Dolphins needed a culture change. Again, this comes from the Sun-Sentinel. Very interesting stuff. Now, remember, if I didn't make that clear enough, it's the first one. I actually got confused when I first read this article that it was the second one. I was like, why would he make all those changes if we basically wanted to lose that game because we played so many young players? I mean, David Fells was our starting quarterback that day. So just to be clear, it's the first one where Jay Cutler, I think, had 6 turnovers in that game, and I'm including fumbles in that. The Miami Dolphins have publicly and privately complained about the demeanor of last year's team for months. And it appears that last December's 24-16 loss to the Buffalo Bills was the game that convinced Coach Adam Gase a culture change was needed. So that is pretty crazy. That after that game, he was like, yeah, this needs to change. That must have sucked for the rest of the way there. That December 17th road loss to a playoff-bound Bills team was the game that Gase consistently referenced Thursday morning when addressing Miami's offseason news on the Joe Rose Show. In that game, the Dolphins trailed 24-6 at the half, converted just 5 of 16 third down opportunities, scored points on 1 of 3 trips in the red zone, and were forced to kick 3 field goals. The Dolphins outgained the Bills by 21 net yards, but committed 7 penalties for 60 yards, and quarterback Jay Cutler threw 3 costly interceptions, including 3 fumbles. I think this is a quote from Adam. He said, quote, "When we look back at it, we were right there in the mix at the end. We end up winning against New England the previous week, and we've got a great shot going up to Buffalo and really making a move, taking a rough season and turn that thing around real fast." That's what Adam Gase says. He goes on to say, quote, we didn't get it done. We're not the team we wanted to be." He continues to say, quote, "When you hear the word frontrunner used by people to describe us, that's not something that is going to be accepted here. We're going to have to make changes, and we're going to make sure we get the right people that we do the things that we want them to. The end of the year told myself a lot as far as who is in and who is out." The Dolphins didn't re-sign Cutler, who Gase pushed the organization to sign to a 1-year, $10 million contract to replace Ryan Tannehill, who suffered a season-ending knee injury during training camp. The Dolphins traded Jarvis Landry to Cleveland for a 2018 4th-round pick and a 2019 7th-round selection because they couldn't agree on a long-term deal with 3-time Pro Bowl selection. In Miami also released starting center Mike Pouncey and defensive tackle Ndamukong Suh, both team captains, in a move that cleared $24 million in cap space. Tight end Julius Thomas and linebacker Lawrence Timmons, 2 starters added last offseason, were also released, and they didn't re-sign guard Jermon Bushrod, safety Michael Thomas, tailback Damian Williams, linebacker Neville Hewitt, and defensive end Terrence Fede. This is another quote from Adam Gase. He said, quote, "That game at Buffalo just seemed like a 20-hour-long game. I was waiting for us to turn the corner and kind of get going, and nothing was working for us. There was no swagger. There was no attitude. That was disappointing to see. It wasn't everybody when you watch the tape. There were guys who stand out noticeably as far as their effort and their play, which was extremely high. They were giving everything they had. We just did not have enough guys doing that, and that's why things stuck out so much in some of these games. That's why we felt like we needed to change some things around." Oh man. The Dolphins followed up the Buffalo loss with a 19-13 loss in Kansas City and a 22-16 home loss to the Bills, who clinched the AFC's final wildcard spot with that win. Gase is convinced that defensive end Robert Quinn, offensive lineman Josh Sinton, and Daniel Kilgore, receivers Danny Amendola and Albert Wilson, and tailback Frank Gore, the team's newcomers, will provide better leadership in the Dolphins locker room, helping groom young players. Adam said, quote, "We're trying to make sure everyone in the locker room is all trying to go for the same thing, all about winning. As long as we've got 53 guys in the same direction, trying to find a way to win a game for that week, that's what we're going to look for." And I think we can all agree we want winners on this team. That's for sure. People who are all about football and not about their brand and selfish players. I think that's what we all want. And you know, we'll get to that after this. Gase also seemed excited about the return of Ryan Tannehill, who had a 37-40 record as the Dolphins' starting quarterback since 2012. Tannehill, who had the ACL in his left knee surgically repaired in September, will participate in Miami's offseason training program, which begins April 16th. But Gase admitted that the plan is to be smart about how the team uses Tannehill early, possibly limiting his movement. He said, quote, "Anytime I see him, I get excited, but he's giving you everything he has. He's gone above and beyond his rehab. He's really pushing hard to make sure he's better than he's ever been, especially health-wise." Tannehill, who produced a 93.5 pass rating in their one season together in 2016. Gase said, "If I try to restrict him in any way, that's not going to go over well with him. He's such a competitor. He knows his body and knows how he's feeling. You've seen a lot of guys come off injuries and get close to being the same guy they were before they got hurt." Another player Gase expects to take his game to another level is receiver Devontae Parker, who was limited by a high ankle sprain for the most of 2017. Gase envisions Parker, who caught 57 passes for 670 yards and scored 1 touchdown last season, as a player who can carry the passing game, catching 80 to 90 passes in 2018. But he realizes that the only way the former Louisville standout can be that productive is if he stays healthy, which hasn't been the case since Miami drafted him in 2014. The 14th overall pick in 2015. Oh man, I guess this is what Gase had to say about DP. He said, quote, "He wants to be one of those guys that are talking about who's at the top of their game and top of the NFL is what he meant. He's done so much to put himself in that position where he can stay healthy. He's a guy we all have high hopes for on this roster." Okay, so there's a lot to break down here. Number one, it's very interesting. Obviously, Adam explained himself. It's not like he just said, yeah, after that Buffalo game, there was a lot of lackluster play, all that other stuff. He explained it in a way that I felt like he actually meant it. Like, he really meant that is the biggest reason why most of those players are not on the team anymore. Which is very interesting. You know, I could understand some of those players being gone. I could truly understand that. I could believe Sue was an issue, because obviously, even before we let him go, there were reports. Obviously, when Joe Philbin was here, he could not coach him. It just couldn't happen. It just wasn't going to happen. Now, whether that was the same thing with Adam Gase, I don't know. I don't really remember a report where that was an issue. But there was a report that it was very hard to get Sue to lead the other men and be the voice of reason. Excuse me, hit the mic accidentally. Be the voice of reason on that defense and really truly lead this team. And that was something that was lacking. He was apparently a very quiet dude, just hard. He was always hardworking, is what the report said. And so obviously, that's a fishy one. But I can believe that about Sue. I can totally believe that. As for Mike, that was not a leadership thing. That was not a competitive thing. That was a hip issue. So that's why we let him go. It had nothing to do with the locker room. Jarvis is the one that I just do not get. I just can't. I know he's passionate, and he's no Odell Beckham when it comes to people are like, oh, Odell's passionate. Yeah, he's passionate, but he's also a diva. Like, the way he carries himself and the way he expresses his passion is not the right way to express your passion. The way Jarvis expresses it is totally different, in my opinion. I think it is absolutely the right way to express it, especially coming from a wide receiver. I don't think we've quite seen a player at that position be that passionate and be that demonstrative and be that just wears his emotion on his sleeve. Like, Larry Fitzgerald's a quiet guy. He's not like on the field when he makes a big play. He's not like flexing his muscles and getting his, knocking people over, getting getting a teammate's face and hyping him up. Very much like a Brady at a receiver position. Just highly competitive guy. I just cannot believe that about Jarvis, and I never will believe that about Jarvis. Whatever the real reason was, I don't know. But obviously that's for the Dolphins to. They made the decision. But it's very interesting that game was the that game was the last straw in Adam Gase's eyes for a lot of different players. Now, I can't remember when Jarvis went off. I think that was the home loss to Buffalo, and a lot of people were pointing to the fact that that was one of the big reasons that the Dolphins let him go. So clearly that wasn't the case. So yeah, it is very interesting. I would agree with Adam. I think some players deserved to be cut. Like Lawrence Timmons deserved to be cut. Julius Thomas deserved to be cut. I don't know if Sue deserved to be cut, like because of his actions and the way he carried himself. I don't think so. I think his price tag was just. I think the reason the Dolphins let him go is the money was too big. The money was just too much. It was just way too much, and I think we had to get out from under it. He was not helping the team in any way. Obviously we were a mediocre team while he was here, and most of the time below a mediocre team. I think we had a 6-10 record, 10-6, and I think an 8-8 record with him, or two 6-10 records and one 10-6 record. So it wasn't like Sue was helping anything anyway. So I think there was a variety of different reasons why some of these players were let go. But Adam definitely was frustrated with a lot of players on this team, and not to mention the playbook issues that he was having with some of these players. There's a lot of different things, and obviously as a fan watching that game, that was like all of the things that went wrong in that season combined into one particular game. Obviously, like he said, we were coming off that New England win, and we really thought maybe we're going to turn this thing around. But penalties killed us last season, just undisciplined football. You could see, like Adam said every week, like the lack of preparation and knowing the playbook was a big reason of why we were so bad on offense. And you could see it with all the penalties and just the miscues and all and stuff of that nature. We couldn't execute a play right. So that and combine that with how Jay Cutler was playing, it was just a bad deal. But it's very interesting that game was the game that he was like, yeah, I can't, it's over. In the aftermath of all of that, obviously most of our stars are no longer on the team. But what the Dolphins were able to do in terms of, recovering from such a loss of talent, I think was tremendous. I mean, retaining Juwan James was a huge get. Retaining all the key players on the offensive line, replacing Mike Pouncey with a more than capable center who I think is going to help out this offensive line a ton. He comes from such a great background, and he's the epitome of what the Dolphins need on this offensive line. A rough rider, a grinder, a guy who's a really, really good run blocker. He's not quite the pass blocker that Mike was, but he's a physical player, and that is something that this offensive line was lacking from a game-to-game basis. Run blocking was just atrocious. So what the Dolphins were able to do with adding Josh Sitton, I mean, our running game is going to be so much better because of some of the moves that we've made. Getting a Danny Amendola, who I hope is like Wes Welker 2.0 in this offense, because when Wes Welker was in Adam Gase's offense, it was lights out, especially in the red zone. Albert Wilson, who's he's an ascending player, who I can't wait to see what he does with Adam Gase in this offense. And I think he's going to improve the screening game a ton. I think he's going to do a lot of different things. So the two slot players that we replaced Jarvis with, I think are going to come in and do great things. I think some of the players that are developmental prospects over the last few years, I think finally, hopefully, are going to blossom into what we thought they would be. I think Kenyon Drake's going to be a Pro Bowler this upcoming season. I think he's going to seriously emerge as one of the better running backs in the NFL and probably a top 3 in the AFC. I really do believe that. I'm so excited to see, especially if we draft him, a running mate with him that is like a baller. So this offense is completely different than it was a year ago. I think it's better for it, to be honest with you. Adam Gase added a bunch of people that he loved. These are people that he picked. Most of the people on the offense over his years here are not players that he picked, are not players that he drafted, are not players that he wanted. Most of the players on this team now are players that he handpicked himself, him and Mike Tannenbaum, and these are the players that he wanted. So I think this offense is better in a way than it was a year ago. I think schematically, I think this offense is a fit schematically, I think this is the best fit in terms of personnel and playbook that he's had since he's been here. So I'm excited to see. Now, whether there are still huge questions, don't get me wrong, we do not know if Devontae Parker can be a dominant X receiver, which this offense is going to need in this upcoming season. Kenny Stills is one of the best deep threats in the league, but he's not a dominant outside receiver. Devontae has to be that this upcoming season. And Adam Gase said that in that article, that he believes he can be an 80-90 catch guy. I don't know if he can do that. I don't think any of us would bet any kind of money on that. But now that Jarvis is gone and most of his targets are going to be spread out a lot more, I hope Devontae takes advantage of that. I hope he stays healthy, and we'll see. But I think this offense's consistency, how they start off games, I think all of those things are going to be improved. I think third down efficiency is going to be way better due to the offensive line and the run blocking. We're going to get a lot more third and manageables than we had last season. I think penalties are going to be way down from a year ago because of the players that we added onto this team. So I'm very, very optimistic about this offense. And like I said, I think this is the best personnel scheme fit that he's had since he's been here. So can't wait to see what he does with this offense. Moving on to some more positive news, that was negative news, but this is positive news. Hopefully this makes some of you guys happy. Dolphins are going to visit with quarterback Lamar Jackson. I think most Dolphins fans really want Lamar Jackson. I want Lamar Jackson. If we could somehow snag him and a really good first-round pick, I'd be the happiest man on the planet Earth. I love Lamar Jackson. This article comes from the Finsider, excuse me. It's no surprise when the Dolphins meet with top quarterback prospects in this year's draft. They bring their Hall of Fame quarterback along for the ride. Today was no different. And when Miami summoned former Heisman Trophy winner Lamar Jackson to Davie, Dan Marino was not far behind. Per SiriusXM's Craig Mish, the Dolphins held a private workout with Lamar Jackson on Friday afternoon, and the GOAT was there to watch. It is uncertain how serious the Dolphins are at drafting quarterback in round one, but if all of the big four quarterbacks are gone early in round one, Lamar Jackson is one hell of a consolation prize during his tenure at Louisville. Jackson threw for 9,000 yards and 69 touchdowns. He also added an additional 4,000 yards on the ground, in addition to 50 touchdowns on the ground. Jackson is literally a human highlight reel, and with the right coaching will be one of the league's top quarterbacks for years to come. That's what makes him so exciting. And, I was very critical of Lamar in terms of oh, man, will he ever be able to be a great pocket passer? Because that's what brings championships to your city. I have totally changed my mind on that. Watching Cam Newton's success over his tenure there with Carolina is unprecedented. I mean, his first 6 years in the league have been one of the more dominant 6 years to a start of an NFL career in NFL history. Now, people will go online and look at the stats and be like, whoa. 22 touchdowns probably is his average through the air, and maybe 14 to 12 interceptions is around his average. You guys also have to look at how many touchdowns he has on the ground. This man is putting up 30 touchdowns, well over 30 touchdowns a season on the ground. He has more rushing touchdowns, I'm talking about Cam Newton, than Marshawn Lynch does in his entire career. That is ridiculous. And how today's NFL is set up, you really do, it helps to have an athletic quarterback who's a playmaker. And Lamar Jackson is Cam Newton. He's not as big, and I don't think he's going to be as durable as Cam Newton, but he's as electrifying. He's just as good as Cam was coming out of college in terms of his passing ability. And I think Lamar has a place in today's, like I said, Cam's putting up 30 plus touchdowns a year, not just with his arm, but his legs too. And I think Lamar Jackson can be that dominant. And I don't care how you score touchdowns, as long as you're scoring touchdowns. So that's what makes me so excited about Lamar Jackson as a talent. And if he somehow fell in the Dolphins' lap, it would be amazing. And this is what I hate about this particular draft is I get so psyched up about certain prospects. Seriously, this is why, as a fan, you have to calm yourself down, because rarely do you ever get what you want as a fan. And I have a variety of different scenarios, I think, as we all do as Dolphins fans, where we'll all be pretty happy with it. And I think getting some kind of talented quarterback in this draft, I think, is one of the better scenarios. What round that comes in, I don't know. If it's a round one, somehow we get a Josh Rosen or somebody like that. But it's just hard to. It's hard. I try to not get myself psyched up, with some of these players like Derwin James and Roquan Smith and some of these players, because you never know what the Dolphins are going to do. And it sucks because all of these players are so talented. And if we somehow snag Lamar Jackson, oh my God, man. Oh my God. The preseason games would be one of the most televised, the television ratings on our preseason games would be ridiculous. I would be so happy if that happened. All right. Another story about a collegiate player visiting the Dolphins. This comes from Pro Football Talk. Dolphins bringing in Luke Falk for a visit. Early in the pre-draft process, the Dolphins were linked to Oklahoma quarterback Baker Mayfield, and Coach Adam Gase has made his fondness for him known. But they also have a backup plan in case they can't or choose not to get him at the 11th overall pick. According to Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald, the Dolphins are bringing in Washington State quarterback Luke Falk in for a visit next week. He's the second quarterback known to be visiting the Dolphins, with Mayfield being the other. Falk's probably a mid-round pick and would present a different storyline than Mayfield for a team that has insisted they're fully behind Ryan Tannehill, even though they haven't seen much of him lately. The Dolphins signed Brock Osweiler and David Fells this offseason, neither of whom would prelude them for drafting a quarterback and having an understudy and potential replacement. So yeah, Luke Falk, I've talked about a lot on this show. I like Luke Falk. I really do like Luke Falk. I think like I said when we if you want to go check the video or the podcast, I'm not going to spend 10 minutes talking about Luke Falk again. I already did that. If you guys want to go check that out, we went through like every quarterback prospect in the draft that the Dolphins could potentially draft. We went through Lamar Jackson, Mike White, Luke Falk. We did an entire draft profile on these players. But one of the things I said about Luke Falk is we kind of know what Luke Falk is going to be. His ceiling is not very high. What you saw in college, statue quarterback who's a very accurate passer, not a big arm for his size, very hard to bring down in the pocket though. Something that's very interesting about him. But other than that, had to use his brain. He wasn't a great athlete, so he had to use his head a lot. He reads coverage well. He had a ton of pass attempts in college and somehow kept his turnovers down and his touchdowns up. So all of those things were positives, but you kind of know what Luke Falk is going to be. He's going to be either a very good backup in the NFL or potentially could be maybe Joe Flacco with a lot less athleticism. I don't know who I would, because he doesn't have a big arm. I really don't know what to really compare Luke Falk to. But his ceiling is not as high as some of these other players. I think that's the thing that I would say about Luke Falk that I don't like. Is just his physical attributes aren't as good as some of these other prospects. Let's see here. What else we got here? This next news story is the Dolphins thrive at drafting running backs, but it's not a top need this year. This comes from the Sun Sentinel. I thought this was interesting. Frank Gore, the 30-year-old running back who is likely headed for the Hall of Fame, figures to be among the Dolphins' biggest offseason signings in 2018. But is Gore, who will serve as a complimentary back to starter Kenyon Drake, enough to prevent the Dolphins from drafting a running back this year? Miami's draft and develop philosophy has thrived in recent years when it comes to middle-round running backs. 3 of the past 4 running backs the Dolphins have drafted have become starters, and all 4, each of which was selected behind the 3rd and 5th rounds, are productive players. The draft schedule for April 26th through 28th provides the Dolphins an opportunity to get a quality running back in the middle to lower rounds, possibly even Mark Walton, the former University of Miami standout. This year's running back draft class is led by Penn State's Saquon Barkley, a likely top 5 pick. After Barkley, the order is muddled, but the talent remains, starting with LSU's Darius Geis and Georgia's Sony Michel, who is one of my favorite players in this draft. I love Sony Michel. The former American Heritage Plantation star, they're projected as late to first or second round selections. Sony Michel is definitely going to be a second round pick. After that, it's in no particular order. I could see him falling to the 3rd round with some of these other running backs as well. Georgia's Nick Chubb, Auburn's Kerryon Johnson, USC's Ronald Jones, San Diego State's Rashad Penny, North Carolina State's, oh god, I can never pronounce that kid's name, Hines, Oregon's Royce Freeman, and Arizona State's Callan, I don't know how to say his last name either, who are among the, just to give you guys, so it's Ballage, Ballage, I don't know how to say his name, who are among the second or third round projections. Out of all of those guys, though, I love Rashard Penny, and we'll talk about that here in a second. In the third or fourth round, the Dolphins could probably select among one or two of the aforementioned players, as well as Walton, a talented player who missed most of last season with an ankle injury, or perhaps North Carolina State Jalen Samuels, TCU's Kyle Hicks, or Iowa's Akram Wadley. The Dolphins have bigger needs in the first 3 rounds than running back, including linebacker, defensive tackle, tight end, and possibly offensive line, quarterback, and safety. But Miami has somewhat of a golden touch drafting middle to late round running backs. In 2012, the Dolphins drafted Lamar Miller in the 4th round. He's starting for Houston. In 2015, Miami drafted Jay Ajayi in the 5th round. He's starting for Philadelphia. In 2016, Miami drafted Kenyon Drake in the 3rd round. He'll start for the Dolphins. Miami selected Mike Gillislee in the 5th round in 2013, and he didn't work out that well, but he still remains in the NFL with New England, where he rushed for 383 yards and 5 touchdowns last season. Gore's signing might have made running back a third-day rounds 4 through 7 draft selection from Miami. Gore, the former UM and Coral Gables High School star, is a reliable back who hasn't missed a game in the last 7 years. Last year, with Indianapolis, he rushed for 961 yards. He's 5th on the NFL's all-time rushing list with 14,000 yards, just 75 yards behind number 4, Curtis Martin. However, Gore, who turns 35 on May 14th, doesn't seem to be a long-term answer. Miami has unproven running backs like Sonoris Perry and Brandon Radcliffe on the roster. Aside from Drake and Gore, the Dolphins might want more. Coach Adam Gase wants a running back who is diverse. Above all, Gase wants someone who can run, catch, and block in pass protection. In light of Miami's recent draft to develop success at running back, the Dolphins might feel comfortable drafting one in, say, the 4th round or later. Miami has 2 4th-round picks and playing him on special teams while allowing him to learn. After all, between Drake, who has a little wear and tear, and Gore, who is dependable as anyone in the NFL at his position, Miami shouldn't feel obligated to draft a running back who must play this year. You know, I don't think that's an interesting way of looking at it. That the Dolphins don't need one, that means they shouldn't take one. I don't know if, like, I don't know. I mean, it's very interesting to look at it like that. I don't know. I'm a huge fan of in today's NFL of having 2 running backs who can be on the field at any point in time that you have no idea what the play call is going to be. Say we drafted Kerryon Johnson out of Auburn, a thumper who is not a great receiving back. He is a downhill running back, right? He's not east-west type of running back. He's north-south. If I have somebody like that I'm running it downhill, or it's going to be a play action pass. And I'm not faking it to him and throwing it to him, that's for sure. But if I had Sony Michel and Kenny Drake on the same roster and on the same team, you have no idea what I could possibly do with both of those guys. Both of them can run between the tackles, outside of the tackles. They can catch it out of the backfield and go for 89 yards for a touchdown. That's what I love about those type of players. And I think I don't understand why, if we got a Sony Michel in the 2nd round, I think that would be tremendous. I think that would be a great pick. And again, that's depending on what we do in the 1st round is what it is. If we don't have a linebacker in the first 2 rounds, it ain't going to be an ideal situation. But if Sony Michel is the only one left, or Lamar Jackson or somebody else is the only one left in that round, and they're talented than everybody else, then I don't see what the problem is. That's just how I look at it. I don't look at it like, oh, Sony Michel is on the board, but I don't know who. See, even Rashaan Evans, I think he would probably be gone in the 1st round. The kid from Boise State, that would be a great 2nd round pick. I can't remember his name. He has a foreign name. But I don't know if any of those guys are going to be there. So I think That's why the Dolphins should take him. And if they take Roquan Smith in the first round or Derwin James, I think that gives you any kind of leeway to do whatever you want. We can move TJ McDonald to linebacker if we wanted to, if we got Derwin James. So I don't necessarily think that's just an interesting way of looking at it, I guess. I don't know. I would love to have Sony Michel on this roster. I think he's going to be a dynamic playmaker for years to come. But I just don't agree with that kind of a philosophy when it comes to some of those players in the draft. This next news story, 2018 NFL Draft, is Kyle Lauletta the Dolphins' answer at quarterback? Finding a quality quarterback, this comes from the Palm Beach Post. Finding a quality quarterback in the upcoming NFL Draft will probably require the Miami Dolphins to do some digging. It's unlikely an obvious talent will be around when they pick at the 11th overall pick, leaving them to scour the next tiers of prospects for a hidden gem. Kyle Lauletta could be their guy. He's got accuracy and mobility that every team covets. The asterisk that many have placed on him, however, is that he's played in the FCS for Richmond. That's not the best competition, obviously, which makes it more difficult for NFL teams to judge how well he'll adapt to facing pro defensive lines and pass coverages. Lauletta is used to people doubting him, though. He's got minimal attention from major college programs when he was a high school player, and he's already proven them wrong with an impressive run at Richmond. Let's see here. He said, I don't know who the heck said this, quote, this is from Kyle Lauletta. He said, quote, I have a big chip on my shoulder. I thought I was good enough to play at that level. I got recruited by a lot of those schools. They just, for whatever reason, didn't pull the trigger on scholarship offers. I've always felt I've played my best games in the biggest moments, so I don't shy away from the big stage. That's when I feel at my best. There have been others who emerged from small programs to become NFL starters, including Philadelphia's Carson Wentz and Jimmy Garoppolo of the 49ers. Wyoming product Josh Allen is among those being touted to be a top 5 pick this year, or tapped to be a top 5 pick this year. Lauletta has propelled himself into the mix as a mid-round quarterback in this year's draft, while Mason Rudolph and Lamar Jackson are decidedly in their tier ahead of him. He's often pointed as an option for teams that to get shut out. He's often pointed as a prospect for teams that get shut out for the top 4 guys. The Dolphins are likely to find themselves in the market now that the four best quarterback prospects are expected to be gone in the first 5 picks. It's hard to project someone like Lauletta. But it seems like he won't be selected in the first 2 rounds. That said, ESPN's analyst Mel Kiper sees him as a second to third round talent. Miami's picks 42nd and 73rd in the second round and second rounds and third rounds respectively. They also have 2 4th round picks. The team probably can't wait longer than that if they want Lauletta, because they don't have a selection in the 5th round. The Dolphins are locked into Ryan Tannehill as their starter this year and have David Fells and Brock Osweiler competing for a backup job. Adam Gase said he's willing to keep 3 quarterbacks on the 53-man roster if the team drafts one this year. Lauletta is in the draft bargain bin because of his diminished competition he faced in college. He's on the smaller side of 6'3", 215 pounds, and he doesn't have an overwhelmingly strong arm. He's not afraid to admit it either. He believes he can overcome any of his physical shortfalls with intelligence. Lauletta said, quote, "You have to process information at a high level. All the great quarterbacks do that. They understand the game. They have a great feel for situational football and just understanding defenses and defensive structure. I'm a guy who takes notes diligently. I was elected captain 2 years in a row. You've got to be able to take charge and be comfortable in leadership positions. I've done that. This transition is going to be fairly easy. It's an environment that I feel comfortable in." He did that at Richmond, where he completed 64.9% of his passes, threw for 3,000, almost 4,000 yards, and had 28 touchdowns against 12 interceptions in 11 games. He was right under those numbers the 2 previous seasons as well. That performance is a part of why Kiper linked him to Garoppolo, New England's second-round pick out of Eastern Illinois in 2014, and recommended him as someone the Dolphins should explore. Watching him at Richmond, this is from Kiper, watching him at Richmond and the way he played at the Senior Bowl, he just didn't seem to be in awe of anything. He just fits, goes out there and competes. So very interesting stuff. I think the one thing I would say about Kyle is the same thing I would say about Luke Falk. I just don't know what his ceiling is. He's definitely nothing like Jimmy Garoppolo. I think Jimmy had a bigger arm. I think Jimmy had better football instincts. His ability to escape pressure in the pocket and keep plays alive is very Tony Romo-esque, the way he spins out of pressure and, like I said, is able to keep the plays alive. I don't think he's a playmaker like that. A lot of people like to compare him to Tom Brady because he has some of the physical attributes that Tom had. He's just a very smart player, knows how to play the game the right way, doesn't have a lot of physical tools to be like a Big Ben Roethlisberger or a Cam Newton. He's not throwing it 80 yards down the field. He's not, running over 4 people for a first down. He just doesn't. He's just a Tom Brady-esque quarterback, not in the way he's going to go out there and win you 6 championships, but he's just a cerebral player, like a Drew Brees. He just overcomes his shortcomings as a physical athlete and uses his intelligence. And he has a quick release, too. That's one thing that he does have. He has a very, very quick release. He does throw the ball with touch. He's super accurate. It's not like he doesn't do other things well. He doesn't have a Josh Allen arm. And obviously there's more to playing football than just throwing it 80 yards down the field. And Kyle Lauletta has all of those attributes. I think that's why a lot of teams love him. Not to mention him throwing the 3 touchdowns at the Senior Bowl really helped him out as well. So there's a lot to like about Kyle. I just don't think he's like a Jimmy Garoppolo at all. I see a lot of people comparing him to him. He's nothing like him. He's more, like I said, like a Tom Brady guy, very cerebral quarterback. He does have some wiggle. He ran a 4.8 40 at the combine, so he's not a statue quarterback. He can pick up some first downs for you with his legs. So a very interesting prospect. Now, if he's not a bad. I don't know if he'll be drafted. Quarterbacks obviously get overvalued, so I wouldn't be surprised if he did get drafted in the second round. It would be very interesting to see. But again, obviously would not be a bad pick for the Dolphins. But again, if Lamar Jackson or somebody else is there, obviously you would go with him over Kyle, just because those guys have much greater upside, and their talents are just unmatched. And once in a lifetime, like Lamar Jackson is just a once in a lifetime type of a talent. And Kyle is just your run-of-the-mill quarterback who could be, he does have potential to be a franchise quarterback. It's not like he doesn't, but he just doesn't have any kind of attribute that you just go, wow, when you watch him play. So, yeah, that's all for the news, guys. 37, I think, half an hour of news. It's not that bad. There's not a lot to talk about today. I thought there was going to be a lot, but we're almost in the draft. I'm going to start, I think next week we're going to do a mock draft, which should be fun. I don't know how long you guys want me to do it. If you want me to do a full 7, if you want me to do just 3 rounds, that's up to you guys, whatever you guys want to listen to. So that is going to be it, guys. I am Skags83, and I will see you guys in the next one.